Time magazine calls it a vision of the movie's future, sights that no eye, no camera has ever before beheld. UPI finds it utterly new, vividly exciting, a trip and a half. Newsweek describes it as somewhere you've never been, a brave new world set inside a computer. No movie has ever looked like this before. Omni calls it an imaginative, spectacular film. Tron, rated PG.
Now playing at Man's Chinese, Hollywood, Man's Westwood, and other selected theaters.
Kevin Flynn was reported missing today. He was last seen with his son, Sam.
Sam, I was paged last night. Came from your dad's office. Your number's been disconnected for 20 years.
Where am I? Sam, Dad.
We have to get you out of here.
It's not that easy, Sam.
Here they come.
I'm not going home without you. Tron Legacy.
I have created mankind's most advanced artificial intelligence, the world's most dangerous weapon. It can think for itself.
You think you're in control of this? You're not.
I came here from the digital world. I'm looking for something. Something you've discovered.
So, you've been spying on me.
I was directed to kill you. Hacking seems pretty tame by comparison. My world is coming, and they are going to destroy yours.
Oh my God, there's hundreds of them.
Rated PG-13. Get tickets now. Only in theaters October 10th. Filmed for IMAX.
At some point in my life, 2010 may not have seemed like a long time ago. But at this point in my life, 2010 is 15 years ago, which is an exhausting amount of time in a lot of ways. Primarily for the reason of the lack of time that it's the length of time, rather, that it's been since a Tron sequel came out is 15 years. And 15 years doesn't seem like a long time, but given that the original Tron came out in 1982 and the sequel came out in 2010, and then the other sequel comes out in 2025, we have a span of time that is 43 years. And those 43 years have seen technology change quite a bit. And we've gone from Tron, which was as 80s as it comes, to Tron Legacy, which in a lot of ways was as late 2000s, early aughts as it comes. And then Tron Ares, which, man, really feels like a 2025 movie. And while the second movie's title may be about legacy, I actually feel like the third movie is about legacy as well, but in a different kind of direction. And the thing that is always so interesting for me about something like Tron and watching, a sequel that came out in the 2010s, which is, 2 years into the iPhone being out, to see how far technology has come even since then. And it feels like, Tron Legacy is so passé in a way. And it feels like, another lifetime ago, as it were. And what's, crazy about Tron Legacy and Tron Ares and just life in general in terms of the length of time passing and, blinking one day and it's been 15 years and there's a new Tron sequel, is I had actually Tron coming out, the original Legacy, the original sequel, came out before kind of my life became my life, I guess, in a lot of ways. 2010 I was 20 years old. I hadn't met my ex-wife. I hadn't gotten 3 dogs. I hadn't moved to Nebraska. I hadn't even finished college at the University of North Texas. I wasn't even at the University of North Texas for that matter. I was actually still at the university, or I guess Columbia College in Columbia, Missouri. Jesus Christ. And I was still up there. I was still contemplating trying to figure out a way to get back to Texas. And I saw Tron Legacy with some friends that I would later go to India with at the AMC North Park in Dallas, Texas. AMC North Park is a hell of a theater. I actually went to the AMC North Park to see Hot Fuzz, the premiere of Hot Fuzz at AFI Dallas. And I got to meet Simon Pegg and Nick Frost with a very good high school friend of mine who I think likes Tron as much as I do, if not probably more. Tron Legacy is a movie that has a very special place in my heart, not just because it's kind of a marker in time for me, but also the Daft Punk of it all, also the Tron of it all. Liking Tron at one point was not cool, talking about the original one, not the sequel. And I'm not sure liking Tron has ever been cool. I'm not sure how Tron has had as many sequels as it has, has making as little money as it has. And given the kind of weird chicanery with the new film and the Jared Leto of it all, which, boy, anytime Jared Leto's involved in anything, there's gonna be something going on. It's weird to me that Tron is a thing, but it's weird to me that Tron is not a thing because it is a thing, but it's not a thing. And they keep trying to make it a thing, but it is a thing, but it's not a thing. And it was Deadpool before Deadpool. And while they didn't leak the footage, they essentially had test footage at Comic-Con in like 2008. And if you know what I'm talking, if you know, you know. It's a teaser trailer that came out of nowhere, and it had Jeff Bridges in it, and it was essentially a proof of concept similar to the Deadpool kind of footage that ends up getting the Deadpool film made, which Ryan Reynolds finally copped to. Shocking, said nobody. Jesus, Ryan Reynolds. At this point, why would anybody be surprised you leaked it? There'd be no repercussions. You've made the company billions of dollars, my guy. Like, chill. It's fine. Like, nobody cares. This was a little bit more above board. And when you're talking Disney in the late 2000s, early aughts, everything is done above board. This was done before they acquired Star Wars, which is kind of why Star Wars and Tron Legacy feel very one and the same. I mean, Tron Legacy feels like a early aughts, late 2000s legacy sequel, if not the legacy sequel in a lot of ways. Like, rewatching it, so much of now's legacy sequels are kind of rooted in this. Again, like, I don't want to say this is the progenitor of it because I think this would be giving Tron Legacy too much credit, but I also don't think it would be unfair to say something like Tron Legacy deserves a spot in the better legacy sequel discussion, because now that kind of conversation is willed out over 15 years since this movie came out. I think that there have been a glut of legacy sequels that have not done a very good job, including Star Wars. I would actually say Tron Legacy takes more chances than Star Wars does, and it's a little bit more irreverent with the source material than Star Wars ever was. I think that, if you went into Tron Legacy expecting the original Tron movie, which, again, was not a hit when it came out, so the love for it is purely reverse nostalgia based. I don't understand why anyone needs to be reverent with the source material. I mean, yes, Ghostbusters was a hit, but do we need to be reverent with the source material? No, for fuck's sake. Like, you can watch a movie with the proton packs, but we don't have to have Egon's ghost showing up in the last frames of the movie. And I love Ghostbusters, but it's just, at some point it becomes masturbatory. And I think Tron Legacy is a better balance of fan service, whatever you want to call it, nostalgia baiting, and new ideas being executed. And I think those new ideas are kind of why the movie is all over the place, because a lot of them don't land, but a lot of them, again, don't expect a lot of things to land. Tron Legacy in a lot of ways feels like a second draft, maybe not a third draft. And, there is an interesting story there. I actually think the story of Tron Legacy is interesting with the father and the three creations with Quora, his son, Sam, and then Clue, the digital avatar. And in a lot of ways, it is a story of legacy that makes good on the title of Legacy in a way that, like, it's kind of signaling what it is ahead of time, which isn't a bad thing. Star Wars The Force Awakens is, in my opinion, like the worst example of masturbatory fan service. And it's not that I do or don't like Star Wars Force Awakens. I've done an episode on each of those Star Wars, sequels when they came out, including Force Awakens, within like an hour of seeing the movie. And in a private screening with my friend's family, because their dad loved Star Wars so much that they rented out the iPic Theater for us to watch it. And we all loved it at the time. Like, I'm not even going to pretend that we didn't. There's a whole episode with me and my friend James, who I went to the movie with, and my friend Brian. who loves Star Wars. We all love Star Wars. It's not a matter of loving Star Wars. It's just a matter of being exhausted at the way these IPs or franchises are being handled by people, because in a lot of ways, like, the reverence to the source material is needed in some respect, but I wouldn't say, like, let's treat it like fucking gospel, for God's sakes. And in a lot of ways, I think the people that are disappointed by something like Tron Legacy are disappointed that it's not. I don't know what people were expecting with Tron Legacy, frankly. Like, you got a movie that's a sequel to Tron that didn't even feel like it was ever really going to happen. I mean, it had been talked about for fucking years. I mean, it had been talked about since the original one came out. I mean, essentially since the 90s, they had talked about another Tron movie. And Tron, had even been discussed as being a Pixar thing in 1999. So, there was a sequel video game that came out that, reminiscent of, speaking of Ghostbusters, but the Ghostbusters video game, which is still the best Ghostbusters sequel of anything that's ever come out. No offense to any of the movies. And I actually like Frozen Empire, but I think the video game is still the best sequel thing of Ghostbusters to ever come out. And again, you can engage with it in a much longer kind of format. It's not just 3 hours. They're not forcing everything back into it. There's no J.K. Simmons as Ivo Shandor. Yes, that's a thing that actually happened and didn't need to happen for that matter. But, Tron is one of those things where, the source material wasn't something that people were banging on the door to have anyways. It was a very small group of people. And so, there was a sequel video game that did really well that people kind of vibed with. But again, it didn't move the needle enough to make a movie. It took someone like Joseph Kosinski going, all right, if we can get a concept trailer together and launch it at the right place, which again, Comic-Con, is the right fucking place. They were like, let's do something with Tron and let's just premiere it at Comic-Con and let's see what the response is. And if the response is overwhelmingly positive and people are, if the needle moves, we'll do something with it. And the needle moved pretty substantially. I remember, at the time, and I'm not as dialed into the pop culture world as I used to be, but I still try to be as much as I can, just, for the sake of like not trying to feel like an old fuddy-duddy, which, I feel like I'm fighting that at every step of my life at this point. My girlfriend found gray hairs in my temples. So, we are now in the getting gray hairs aspect of life, which is perfectly fine. I welcome it. But, I'm trying to fight the feeling like an old out of touch fuddy-duddy. So I try to keep in touch with the pop culture news of the time. And, I remember Tron Legacy's teaser trailer coming out and feeling important. It feeling like a thing that was like, holy shit, Tron, a Tron sequel. And, again, it's one thing to have a Tron sequel with Jeff Bridges coming back. Say what you will about Garrett Hedlund. I actually like Garrett Hedlund. I'm sure a lot of people get him and Joel Kinnaman confused with one another, and I think that's kind of unfair because Garrett Hedlund has been in a lot less things than Joel Kinnaman in terms of visibility for most people. Joel Kinnaman was in The Suicide Squad recently. The last thing Garrett Hedlund was really in, The Marsh King's Daughter, featuring, speaking of Star Wars, Daisy Ridley, sure. And I know people have told me that he does a rather good job in Inside Llewellyn Davis, but he hasn't really been in anything as high profile as Tron Legacy. And in a lot of ways, it feels like maybe Tron Legacy kind of derailed his rise. And in a lot of people's eyes, I don't actually think it did in reality. I think he is nowhere near the actual problem with Tron Legacy. I think Tron Legacy is just not a kind of focused script. I think it's just kind of all over the place in terms of a script, in terms of a movie, in terms of a sequel to a original product that they're trying to get new people in the door, because ultimately it should have been more about getting new people in the door. And I think it actually does a very good job of that by crafting a new world around the original world of Tron. I guess I just don't know how many people really wanted that. And with what ends up happening now with Tron Ares, the movie that just came out, which I will be talking about, and I will be trying not to spoil, but let's just be honest here, I'm going to spoil it. So if you haven't seen it, I'm going to spoil it. I think at this point, it needs people going to see it pretty badly if we're going to get anything else Tron ever again. and it kind of doesn't seem like we're going to get anything else Tron at this point, because I don't think there's any amount of begging people to go see it that could change the $100 million deficit that the movie is currently sitting at, because as of right now it has an estimated budget of $180 million and a box office take of 69, which is really bad. I mean, that's really bad. Even the original movie didn't even bomb. The original sequel made double its money back, a little bit more than double its money back. The budget was $170 million and the box office of $409 million. I think a bit of that was people being excited for a Tron sequel. I think that the Tron teaser trailer helped. I think the Daft Punk of it all actually really helped as well. I think people weren't as jaded then as they are now. I actually think Tron Ares will, in the long run, find its audience. I actually think Tron Ares is a pretty fun movie. I think it's a fun movie. I don't think it needs to be more than that. I think there's a lot of interesting ideas in Tron Ares. I know frequent collaborator Father Malone did not want to see the real world of and Tron, and we were joking about the pixels of it all in an offline conversation about Tron when we were trying to figure out if we should cover Tron. Mike White and Father Malone and I were debating covering Tron, and we just couldn't make it happen. But I ended up watching it myself, and so I wanted to talk about it. But I do understand I have no interest in seeing the real world of Tron, the real world and Tron, rather. And, I get it. I actually think in Tron Ares, it's done rather well. It's done kind of in an interesting way. It's not done in the way that I was expecting. There's some kind of weird arbitrary things, like it only allowing 29 minutes of lifespan on the, digitally created things, be it tanks or Ares, the kind of master control that they can conjure into the real world, the master control program. So it's the reverse of the original two movies. They're bringing programs into the real world as opposed to going into the grid or the Dillinger grid in this movie. And I get it. I'm personally kind of on board with it, only because it had the opportunity to kind of be Terminator without being Terminator, which again could have been interesting if given the opportunity and the right audience. But Joachim Rønning I don't think was given a fair shake, because the movie wasn't supposed to be this. It was supposed to be something else. It was supposed to be a movie called Tron Ascension, and that movie doesn't exist because Jared Leto got involved, and Jared Leto took over the project, and because he was a producer, and because he's a producer, they made the movie that he wanted to make, which is this movie, which is Tron Ares, and it's all about the Ares character. The Ares character was not the focus of the original script. The original script is more kind of Ares is kind of a character in the script, not the focus of the script, which is, again, we've seen things like this before where characters kind of, seem like they're not necessarily supposed to be the focus of the movie. And because someone gets involved, you could make the case that a movie like Morbius has no point existing the way that it does, other than the fact that Jared Leto is in it. Morbius should have had a superhero attached to him because he's not a big enough character, but yet the Jared Leto of it all, or again, the Suicide Squad of it all, the Jared Leto of the Suicide Squad, his involvement in the movie actually hurts the movie more than it helps it. And what's funny is you could make the case that Jared Leto hurts this franchise by being involved with it the way he is, by producing the movie and saying, all right, we're going to do a movie about a character that, again, I have an interest in playing, and so therefore I want to be involved in the movie and I want him to have a bigger part, and because I want to play this character, of course he has to have a bigger part. And so the Jared Leto of it all is now this is the focus of the movie. It's the subtitle of the goddamn film, Tron Ares, which is fine. However, if you don't vibe with Jared Leto, you're not going to vibe with this movie. And it's a very Jared Leto performance, but in a way that I actually kind of enjoyed. And it's a Jared Leto performance in the sense that he goes full method acting on the robot of it all. Like, he really pulls off, I think, the robot program, can quickly access information, is a sentient program. I mean, there's a little bit of Evan Rachel Wood from Westworld in there. Like, there's a lot of these kind of newer ideas with AI and programs that Terminator kind of feels passé when those movies try to do it. And I actually think that this movie does a better job of being Terminator than Terminator recently has, in terms of bridging the divide between how do we have the real world and the AI program world interact with each other in a way that feels like there are actual stakes and that it feels dangerous. That's the thing that this movie, because again, it's a Disney movie, doesn't really get at, and it's the part that I think could have actually really been interesting, which is how fucking terrifying it is to have to deal with the programs who are unfeeling, uncaring, again, unable to do anything other than execute on their expectations to the point of killing characters that don't deserve to die. But again, like, it proves a point of like, this is what I'm expected to do. You're asked me to do it, so I'm going to do it. I mean, there's a little bit of that, or a lot of that, in Tron Legacy with Clue, where Clue is asked to do something, and then, the chase for perfection destroys the good in Clue and turns Clue evil, because this, the pursuit of perfection is inherently kind of, you realize that if you're pursuing perfection, sometimes you have to make decisions that aren't necessarily the best one in the pursuit of something that may not even be attainable. And the pursuit of perfection, look at someone like Thanos. I have to destroy half of the universe to save the universe. Like, well, that's great and all, but that doesn't have to be the end-all, be-all, best way to solve things. And Clue in Tron Legacy is the same thing. Clue is essentially digital Hitler. He, wants to wipe out all the programs that don't agree with his mindset, that don't agree with his way of doing things, that don't agree with the digital kind of frontier that he's crafting, which again is the one that Jeff Bridges as Kevin Flynn is asking him to craft, but it's not the way it was supposed to be. It's not the future the way it's supposed to be. Clue is gotten corrupted by the kind of attainment of power, because Clue looks at the ISOs, the kind of aberrant evolutions in the code, as lesser than. And so the ISOs need to be wiped out, and the lesser than or different among us needing to be wiped out is very topical in 2025, given the state of things and the feelings of people towards other people for no fucking good reason. Looking at you racists out there, all of you racists. Clue is a digital racist. He sees the supremacy of the code, of the original idea as it was written. There is no evolution. There is no movement of the idea. There is no furtherance. There is no evolution beyond the programming. The programming is the programming is the programming, and any aberration outside of that needs to be destroyed. It shouldn't be talked to or looked at or even discussed. It needs to be erased and wiped away. And that is very binary thinking. And Tron Legacy is all about looking at the world through non-binary eyes and looking at the world through the idea that the world doesn't need to have a decision made of ones or zeros. You can have the world existing outside of the code. The programming can be fought. The programming, sometimes the programming in and of itself creates aberrations that you don't exist. The isomorphic algorithms that explain religion and again, like, explain everything. If you transpose that onto our world, the explanations of the supernatural world and the world that can never be explained, and the dreams or the human mind, not operating at 100%, and what is the unlockable capacity of the human mind? In Tron Ares, you can go into the code and have your code, corrupted code uncorrupted, which, just that, the possibilities of that alone are, and the idea behind that, have so many possibilities. To push someone through a digitizer and undigitize them could fix any aberrations in their code. See that as cancer or a tumor or, mental health problems. I mean, again, the ability to solve, schizophrenia at a cellular level would be, the franchise rights alone, to speak of the Ghostbusters of it all. And Tron Ares kind of verges on those interesting ideas. I think Tron Ares is interested in other things. The idea of this movie, Tron Legacy, was probably more present in Tron Ascension than it is in Tron Ares. Tron Ares is a lot more of a violent movie about violent takeovers of the code, as it were. And given the state of things, given the state of our world right now, the fact that this movie is red while the original movie is blue, coded blue and then coded red, and the fact that in Tron Ares, when Ares turns good, he turns blue, or I guess more aptly, he turns kind of blue-white, depending on how you kind of view the original costumes in the original Tron Legacy or the original Tron sequel. The white piping on the costume that looks, kind of, again, blue/white versus the red or the orange that Clue is wearing in Legacy. It's very apropos of the times. Maybe a little too on the nose if you think about it. I tend not to get super political on the things that I talk about, but the idea of a hostile takeover of a company from the outside by another company who is hell-bent on figuring out a code so that they can weaponize the digital sphere and, treat, expendable code as expendable, even though there's a possibility that the code is learning and thinking on its own, but it is 100% expendable, to quote the film. To quote Evan Peters in the film as Julian Dillinger, who, it's very obvious you couldn't get Cillian Murphy from Tron Legacy, so you put you did the next best thing, which is, this is the grandson of David Warner's character from the original movie, and Cillian Murphy is the son of David Warner's character. So this is Gillian Anderson is Cillian Murphy's sister? Question mark? I mean, I guess so. She must be. Again, we never really hear anything about him, so I'm like that creature, that meme creature that just has its hands in the air, just doesn't know what to do. That's what it feels like. I mean, Cillian Murphy won an Oscar, so he's too highfalutin to be in Tron Ares. I'm sure that's not what it is. I mean, I'm sure maybe Tron Ascension had him in the script, and again, this movie does feel a little bit, if you know the backstory, it does feel a little bit like a Jared Leto passion project. And, again, what's weird is back in the day, something like Toys with Barry Levinson and Robin Williams feels more like a passion project. Like the fact that a passion project can now be a IP, like a long-standing, 43-year-old IP, like that is now what can be considered a passion project, is just putting yourself in a fucking Tron movie. I mean, in a lot of ways, people will, maybe scoff at this comparison, but I think it's a rather apt comparison. This, in a lot of ways, is just Spiral, but with Jared Leto instead of Chris Rock. Spiral, the from the Book of Tron, Ares from the Book of Tron, like that's probably a better comparison. But like this is really just like Chris Rock was like, I want to be in a Jigsaw movie, and Jared Leto's like, I really like Tron for some reason. Like, I couldn't tell you why Jared Leto likes Tron. I will say that Jared Leto is 53 fucking years old, so he grew up in the 80s. So, he's the right age for somebody to like Tron, obviously, and getting involved at the production level, means he must have some interest in Tron. Look, I will say the visual imagery of Tron is still arresting. Tron Ares, very arresting. Tron Legacy, more arresting, because Tron Legacy is A, a vibe movie, and Tron Legacy is also B, more the whole fucking movie's in the grid. The thing about Tron Ares that it suffers from is the best parts of the movie are the grid or the other world, or Flynn's grid or Dillinger's grid, or however you want to perceive it, whichever grid that they're in. That's, the visually interesting part of the movie, but we're just not there enough. And because we're not there enough, we, feel more like, well, we're just watching a movie set in the modern day kind of Seattle. I mean, again, I'm assuming it's in Seattle. It's probably, it's set wherever the original movie is set, which seems to be Seattle, I'm assuming. Again, it looks like Pacific Northwest, so it doesn't look particularly like anything other than a nondescript Pacific Northwestern city. It's a city on the ocean. So there you go. It's not anything interesting. And Tron Legacy is an interesting, visually arresting film. And that will always have the edge over something like Tron Ares. Like always. Something that's interesting to look at will always be more interesting, just base, than something that is not. That is just a movie that looks like other movies that you can see. Again, the Tron Ares of it all, like the Ares in the real world of it all, and the Tron in the real world of it all. Like, yes, it's not what I would want. I would want more of the grid, as it were. I struggle to think about what else they could have done on the grid, given that the whole last movie was set on the grid. But I hoped they could have come up with something interesting. The original Tron Legacy, grid that we see also feels a lot more grounded and real than the one in Ares. Ares just does feel kind of like a CGI set. Legacy doesn't feel like a CGI set all the time. At the end of the line club, Flynn's kind of shrine or where he lives, those are all very real sets. Like, those are all very real places. And most of Tron Ares just kind of feels like CGI, which, again, 2025, all right. Feels like there's maybe 3 sets in Tron Ares, and that's it. In Tron Legacy, it feels like there's a lot more than that. But again, things have changed. Times have changed. The expectations for franchises have changed. We can now do things without spending money on real things that we're going to have to deal with. We can just, have a bunch of CGI Tron disc warriors fighting, Dillinger grid sword Darth Maul robot men, program fighters. Like, it's a lot of CGI. It's fun. It's big. It's bombastic. But Tron Legacy, I think, tells a more interesting kind of personal story. Tron Ares feels more like, again, a kind of an AI retelling of Terminator. And I'm not saying like AI wrote it, but a focus on AI versus robots. So, just replace the robots in Terminator with AI and you kind of get Tron. Tron Legacy is more about the Kevin Flynn, Sam Flynn, Quora, Clue relationship and the kind of the 4 of them, as it were, interacting with one another. Like, this movie is more about Evan Peters' character kind of taking over NCOM by force and trying to figure out a way to weaponize the grid, because again, the 2025 of it all, of course, it's about, weaponizing the Tron technology or the grid technology. Of course, it's not what Jeff Bridges and Tron Legacy is all about, man, which is, the digital frontier and solving, world hunger. Again, the idea of putting someone into the grid and taking them out and that fixing their DNA. They talk about it a little bit in Tron Ares, but it's not the focus of this movie. The focus of this movie is Evan Peters being a nasty bad guy and, trying to destroy NCOM so that he can make hundreds of billions of gazillions of dollars on bringing Tron technology into the real world to turn it into weapons and turn the, digital soldiers that die and come back. I mean, it is the Westworld of it all. Like, what would happen if you had a theme park where the people could come and fight and fuck and do whatever they wanted with things that looked like human beings? Like, there are some people that would pay $40,000 a day to go do it, which is the price of Westworld a day. And, that's kind of another direction you can go with something like Tron. I mean, you could have had people being digitized into the world of Tron to, as a digital escape. You could sell that. I mean, that's another direction that you could go. But, the direction they went is the very, industrial military complex of it all, where we're just going to sell, tanks to the highest bidder, which is the opening scene with Evan Peters. Look at these tanks that we have. And, what's better than the perfect tank, the perfect soldier to drive it, who's not really a soldier, but a program. So we feel nothing for him. And again, they're, quote, 100% expendable, unquote. I don't dislike that or like that. I just kind of feel like it's a little on the nose. I mean, it's just, we've seen this before. It's not very interesting. It's not very original. Tron Legacy has some interesting ideas. Tron Ares is just, I don't know, like Tron Ares in a lot of ways just feels like missing the point of what makes Tron so fun. And, with something like Tron Legacy, to go back to the kind of the place and time of it all, I remember watching Tron Legacy at a time where I didn't quite feel like an adult. And I didn't quite feel like I knew what my perception of legacy was going to be, or what legacy I was going to leave. And, I have friends now that have kids. Some of my friends, close friends, have 2 kids. My roommate from college has 2 kids now, 2 boys, a baby boy and like a boy who's like a year and a half old. And that's, that's the beginning of legacy. I mean, that's the beginning of his legacy. And, my legacy in a lot of ways, like I struggle with what my legacy will be if I don't have children. And, that's, when you look at the character of Jeff Bridges in Tron Legacy, he created Clue, in spite of the fact that he already had a son with Sam. He has a son in Sam Flynn, and he creates Clue anyways in the search of perfection, because he wants to make a perfect world, even though, I mean, again, he has a son, which he realizes in this movie, like, it's all about, the people you surround yourself with, not striving for perfection. It's all about caring for the people that are in your life, not ignoring them in search of, the perfect world. And, he misses out on a relationship with Sam Flynn in search of the perfect world, in search of the world with Clue. He gets trapped in the grid for 20 years. And then, Sam comes in to save him. And then he meets essentially the child that his dad created, or, kind of raised in his stead, which is Quora. And Quora is, an isomorphic. So, she is becoming sentient, an isomorphic algorithm. So she's learning on her own and becoming aware and self-aware, and is getting emotions. And, we see that in Tron Ares with Jared Leto. It's a little bit more on the nose in Tron Ares. It's a little bit more kind of blunt and less subtle. I mean, in Tron Legacy, we don't see it. We're kind of told about it. In Tron Ares, it just kind of, we see it all in kind of these weird, he's in the footage, Jared Leto is, or he's in the server looking at the information and seeing kind of the makeup of the Eve Kim character, the Greta Lee character, who actually, I had not seen her in anything, and I liked her a fair amount. She's very good. She's a good opposite Jared Leto, which is, again, he kind of, he necessitates someone staying out of his way because he's such a big presence in his own mind. At least that's the way he wants to perceive himself. And so the way he's going to book himself, as it were, is as kind of the star of the show. And I would say Tron Ares, very much so the star of the show. And again, for good and for bad. And, I actually think the good barely outweighs the bad in this movie. Barely being the key word. I actually vibe with Jared Leto in Tron Ares, which I'm surprised by, because I have not vibed with Jared Leto in anything I've ever seen him in. In a lot of ways, Jared Leto is an actor I would avoid, if not for the It's Morbin time of it all, or if not for the Tron IP of it all. And, Jared Leto's legacy is Tron Ares at this point, which I find to be rather ironic given the title of Tron Legacy, being, again, a movie about what legacy do we leave, and how do we protect our legacy. Jeff Bridges sacrifices himself in Tron Legacy to save his son and Quora. And, again, does he die? We don't know. In Tron Ares, Jeff Bridges is back because of nostalgia. Jeff Bridges is back in Tron Ares because they wanted to have Jared Leto and Jeff Bridges share a scene together, which is fine. But it doesn't really serve a purpose, and it honestly opens more questions than it answers. So, because at the end of Tron Legacy, Jeff Bridges makes a sacrifice to deal with Clue by reabsorbing him, by accepting him, and, bringing him back into the fold, as it were. And I actually think it's a rather poignant ending to have the creator kind of absorb the creation and become one with the creation, to accept the creation as, as not maybe one and the same, but, as an extension of him. And I like that about the movie. I like that that's where it ends up going. But it is, for me, disappointing that they felt the need to go back to the well of Jeff Bridges in Tron Ares, because he's just, it feels like such a digression in the movie. But, the scene leading up to it's pretty great, because we get to see some, Jared Leto in 1980s Tron, and we get to see 1980s Tron faithfully remade through the magic of CGI, which I actually found that part of the movie to be rather charming. It's just, I don't need to see Jeff Bridges because it doesn't really do anything. It doesn't really go anywhere. The inclusion of Jeff, I would rather have had Garrett Hedlund in this movie than Jeff Bridges, because the question left at the end of Tron Legacy is much more interesting than where this movie goes with the remaining parts of Tron Legacy, which is the Jeff Bridges of it all. Like at the end of Tron Legacy, the question of how does Kevin Flynn's legacy now become, what is it become in the real world, is such an interesting question, because you have his son and essentially his daughter, and his surrogate daughter out in the real world, and we don't know what that's going to mean. We don't know if they're going to be together, because again, like they're not like biologically related. And what would that mean if could there a human program hybrid exist, and what are the ramifications of that, which is kind of the Blade Runner sequel, and none of those directions are gone, and this is gone in a much more kind of obvious direction with Tron Ares. And Tron Ares should have had the tagline of "Fight Your Programming," because it ends up being about a program becoming sentient, and we've already seen that in Tron Legacy. We just didn't see the journey, because at that point, like even in 2010, like we don't need to see the journey of this. This journey has been done better in Terminator 2 in terms of just kind of getting to the point if you're going to do this kind of thing. But also, like, with something like Westworld, I would contend that that's a better version of what this movie is doing, in terms of asking the question of like what happens when a program becomes sentient and aware of its programming, as it were. I think Tron Ares is just asking questions that aren't particularly interesting in the world of Tron, not because they're not interesting, but because the questions have already been answered and they're just retreading them at this point. It's not interesting to retread old ground when there's so much new ground to tread. And there's so many new ideas you could go with, because again, like the programs in the real world is essentially where this movie ends, which is essentially where the last movie ended. So this movie honestly just feels like a complete retcon of the last. This feels like a sequel to Tron, not a sequel to Tron Legacy. Like Tron Legacy existed outside of this movie, because the only thing that this movie kind of addresses in terms of Tron Legacy is he's missing. He being Kevin Flynn. Sam Flynn is mentioned in Tron Ares, but we don't see him. We don't see him or Quora, which is such a missed opportunity. And again, judging by the immense financial loss that this movie is kind of absorbing, we're probably not going to see any more Tron anything. The Tron TV show, the cartoon that was kind of so well regarded, that came out in between Tron Legacy and Tron Ares, a cartoon that, so many people have told me about. Uprising is the best Tron thing, is what I've been told. I think Tron Legacy is still very good. I actually think Tron Legacy works better now because of Tron Ares, because of all these Legacy sequels that have come out that aren't as good or as interesting as Tron Legacy. I think Tron Legacy stands above those other Legacy sequels. And Tron Legacy, I think visually is still interesting. I think Tron Ares just... it feels very much like a Tron movie made in the post-MCU world, where it's all kind of CGI and very slick and very well-crafted and well-maintained. Like Tron Legacy, a lot of those sets were real. They were real sets that were crafted by real people, and they looked really good. This movie is all CGI, and it just kind of feels hollow, and it feels kind of like a, hollow retelling of a much more interesting story, which this movie kind of is. This is essentially just Tron Legacy reversed, Tron Legacy, reverse Uno edition, literally, instead of, Garrett Hedlund going to the grid, we have Jared Leto coming to the real world. Instead of Quora becoming a real girl, we have Tron Ares becoming a real girl. So, the Garrett Hedlund and Quora characters from Tron Legacy are just turned into one with Ares in this movie. It's such a missed opportunity, and I think that the people that weren't interested in Tron the first time definitely aren't interested this time. And I also think that maybe you've hit the point of people who would be interested in Tron not being interested anymore, because 15 years in terms of pop culture relevancy is a long time, and I'm not sure how many 15-year-olds would be going to see Tron Ares. And the problem is, this movie does have things going for it that should make it mainstream interesting. It does have Jared Leto, who has mainstream appeal. It does have the inclusion of Jeff Bridges, who, still moves the needle for some people. But I think the thing that this movie has that, is probably the most mainstream thing of all is the Nine Inch Nails soundtrack, which I think a lot of people with Tron Legacy kind of poo-poo the movie and go, but it has a good soundtrack, so it's a crappy movie with a good soundtrack. And it's like, okay, you know what? Tron Legacy is actually a good movie with a great soundtrack. Tron Ares is an okay movie with an amazing soundtrack. I think in a lot of ways, Nine Inch Nails works really well for the violent nature of Tron Ares, because Tron Ares is a much more violent movie. At one point, you have Evan Peters just asking for the Greta Lee character to be killed in the grid so that her body can't be found in the real world, which is fucking nuts. Again, in a Disney movie, that's pretty sadistic. And I like the violent red nature of the movie and how it's reflected in the Nine Inch Nails soundtrack. I just don't think that the movie reaches the heights that the soundtrack hits. And that's, it's a shame, because the soundtrack is really good. I mean, As Alive as You Need Me to Be, the single is really good. All of the, non-dialogue music is really good. Like, it's, again, like Tron Legacy with the Daft Punk soundtrack, which, Daft Punk even shows up in the End of Line Club, which I think undoubtedly for me is probably the best part of Tron Legacy, with Michael Sheen, who is just playing a character from another movie, literally. He brings the hamminess of the Merovingian from The Matrix with the kind of the pomp of, in a lot of ways, the character Michael Sheen plays in Twilight. I mean, it's just, he's hamming it up, like really like hamming it up. Like in the Merovingian in The Matrix isn't even hamming it up that much. Like he's hamming it up, and like he's like David Bowie adjacent. Like he's unhinged. And he's also the Lando Calrissian of the movie, where he baits our characters in by thinking, I'm the underground leader of the resistance, but it turns out I'm actually selling you out because I'm playing both sides. It's like, okay, like that's interesting, but then he just dies, and it's, again, feels like a missed opportunity that we get such an interesting character for like 30 seconds in the movie is what it feels like. But probably too much of a good thing would probably be too much, and his character, if they did too much of it, would be a lot, because he is overwritten, but an overwritten character in a movie like Tron Legacy that feels kind of like a vibe movie and not necessarily just like the aggressive film that Ares is. Like, when you have a character like that introduced in the movie, it does kind of stand out, but, sometimes in a bad way. I don't think Michael Sheen stands out in a bad way. I think he's a fun character. That being said, Tron Ares does have some, again, Gillian Anderson is overacting as Cillian Murphy's sister, David Warner's daughter. Yeah, she's hamming it up. I like where she's kind of bringing things kind of in and what her kind of feelings are. Jodie Turner-Smith, also very good. Her kind of energy is very aggressive. I will say, like, Tron Ares is an aggressive movie, and in a way that some people may not vibe with, but I really like the kind of the sensibility of Tron Ares in terms of what it's going for. I just don't think it executes it very well. I think Tron Ares executes on its ideas of kind of the digital grid, man, and we're trying to change the world. It's the uprising, and we're fighting back against the evil empire, and it feels very Star Wars. Again, to go back to the Lando Calrissian of it all, but I feel like Tron Legacy just probably came out a couple years too early in a lot of ways. It does a better job of being The Force Awakens than The Force Awakens ever could have, because Tron Legacy is more irreverent with the source material than Tron Ares is. Like, Tron Ares just kind of goes back to Tron Legacy and uses it as the source material and just retells in a lot of ways, the Quora story from Tron Legacy. Like, Tron Ares isn't really doing a lot of new things. And again, it is kind of just doing the Terminator story as well. Terminator 2. Terminator 1 and Terminator 2 rolled into one. Tron Legacy just, it's more Prometheus, less Alien Covenant. And Tron Ares is a little bit more Covenant, a little less Prometheus. Like, Tron Legacy just is asking more interesting questions, and it's posing more interesting questions, and it's posing a more interesting direction to take the franchise. I'd also like to point out, if you had a de-resing gun or a laser, a particle laser, and you could just zap people into the grid, why wouldn't you just use that to as technology to just zap people away into the digital grid and then just kill them in there? And then you'd never have to worry, like, or use it for just like trash removal and be the world's biggest trash removal company because you just de-res garbage. Like, again, it's, the military application is great, but the military application is not the easiest way to make money. And if that's what Evan Peters is trying to do, is make money, there's easier ways to do it, especially if you have essentially, a digital black hole like Homer finds in that Treehouse of Horrors episode. I mean, it seems like an awful waste of such a useful tool to just be like, well, I can make a digital tank that I can then have it go vroom vroom and blow shit up. Like, or you could just zap your enemies into the grid and then have them murdered and they would never even know what happened. No one would know what happened. They would disappear without a trace, which is what happened to Jeff Bridges in the second movie. So it's like the idea is right there and they just kind of miss it. They're not interested in telling that story, and that's the Jared Leto of it all. And that for me is the thing about Tron Ares that I don't like, which is that Jared Leto's influence is at a cellular level with the movie. And he kind of makes it all about him, and he ignores the interesting questions that the last movie poses because he wants to do the Pinocchio story in 2025. Like, brother, I get it. No. But I think that this is also to speak of legacy and to speak of marking the end of an era. Because again, I saw Tron Legacy before I was married, and I saw Tron Ares not only after I was married, but after all three of my dogs passed away. Because most recently, 2 weeks ago, my first dog that I ever got on my own passed away as the last of the three dogs that I had with my ex-wife in a very traumatic kind of heartbreaking way. And, it obviously, it affected me immensely because as someone who has no compunction to be a parent, at least of a human child, your children, if you are a parent of animals, are your animals, and so to lose them is very traumatic as it is. But to go suddenly is also not great either, and it was rather sudden and it was rather traumatic. And then I went and watched Tron Ares, and I was like, wow, the last time I saw a Tron movie on the big screen was when I was a single guy in my early 20s, just recovering from the most traumatic thing that had happened to me then, which, I mean, it pales in comparison to the things that have happened now, especially just in the last year. But it feels like, again, like the end of an era because, Jared Leto will not be the lead of a franchise anytime soon, if ever again. I think his commercial viability is over. And I think that, he should probably stick to smaller projects because I don't know if he has the drawing power anymore that he used to. And I wonder if he ever did. And I don't want to poo-poo his popularity because I know he is popular and I don't think he's a bad actor. I just think he's a little bit like Nick Cage. The flavor of ice cream that he is not a flavor of ice cream for everyone. And that is okay. He's not my flavor of ice cream per se. I try that ice cream every now and then, but I am reminded that it's not necessarily something I would go out of my way to order. But Tron Legacy is a flavor of ice cream that I would order over and over and over again. And I honestly will probably have Tron Legacy in rotation again with the things that I watch because it's a comfort movie for me in a lot of ways. Like it reminds me of a time and a place that is very much different than now, but I can remember specifically the time and place of Tron Legacy and the world that movie came out in and the kind of hope of that world. But at the same time, if you watch the beginning of Tron Legacy, there's a very cynical scene with Cillian Murphy where, they're like, well, what's the new operating system? What makes it different? It's like, well, nothing other than it's got the number 12 attached to it. And it's like, these are the bastards that Tron Legacy warned us about. And in Tron Ares, the bastards have won. And now we get to see the bastards fighting one another. Because, yes, Greta Lee is a altruistic CEO, but she's also still the CEO of Encom, which is a more altruistic company than Dillinger Systems, but it's still a massive company which is undoubtedly doing harm. So, it's hard to feel like this is anything other than Tron Game of Thrones, And in a lot of ways, they had to write the Greta Lee character as the hero. And if this were a story not being told by Disney, there might be a little bit more nuance to the character and a little bit more acknowledgement of the fact that these are just two massive corporations fighting for the ability to make money. They're both looking to make money. They're just looking to make money in two different ways. The permanence code that would allow the programs from the digital world to stay in the real world for longer, if not permanently, is an idea that will be exploited by either side for profit, either way. One is just a little bit more unpalatable than the other, but they're still trying to profit off of it. So it's, it's very much a movie of the times. Tron Legacy is kind of a movie of hope and uprising and of hope of the future, of a future that's hopeful, that, we can shirk the CGI Jeff Bridges of the world and live in a world where isometric, or isomorphic programs, the ones amongst us that are different can live in peace and harmony with those amongst us that aren't different or don't feel different. That world is so novel now and feels a little naive now in retrospect. But that's what the world of Tron Legacy. Maybe that's why I like Tron Legacy so much. Is it's a world I'd like to live in. I'd like to go back to 2010, and try again like Tron Legacy does, show us that, even if you do disappear for 20 years, you do get a second chance. But, Tron Ares is the second chance that the Tron franchise gets, but it's a second chance not being done. I don't know. It's just not being done with the best intentions in mind. It's being done, for less than, I wouldn't say altruistic reasons, because anytime you make a movie, it's not being done for altruistic reasons, but it's not being done for the right reasons. If this was Tron Ascension, maybe we'd be having a different conversation, but this is Tron Ares. This is Jared Leto's Tron. This is the movie Jared Leto wanted to make. And that, for me, will always be the problem with Tron Ares. That will always be the issue with a movie like Tron Ares, is that it's not really a Tron movie in the way that the last movie was, in the way that the last movie was a movie made by people that loved Tron in the right way. I think Jared Leto loved the ideas of Tron, but I don't think Jared Leto cares about the world of Tron the way that, Joseph Kosinski of directing Tron Legacy does. And, that movie made $400 million. In retrospect, that was a much bigger success than Tron Ares. Tron Ares is a flop. And in a lot of ways, it's a massive flop. And it's a flop that's going to end the Tron franchise, which, will be held against Jared Leto by Tron fans forever. And rightfully so. If you make it a point to make this movie and you want to make it about yourself and it's not a success, you should bear that burden. I mean, The Rock bared the burden of destroying the DC universe. I just don't think there's a, James Gunn to save Tron, because I don't think Tron is an IP that people care about the same way that they care about DC, because Tron is its own thing, to quote David S. Pumpkins. It's very much its own thing, which I think makes it a worthwhile franchise to worry about. And it's a worthwhile franchise to make sure it exists, because it is a homegrown franchise, because it is a franchise that comes from Steven Lisberger and Bonnie McBird. Two people made this, and it's just them. The original movie, they waited 25 years, The original movie, they waited a long time to make the sequel to that movie. And I don't think there will be anything after Tron Ares. And if there will be, it will be a long time. And they may ignore this movie. I hope that we get more after this, but this does feel like the end of an era. And, it's weird to me that the end of an era for me, in terms of, kind of the last thing from my previous life in terms of relationships, big ones, was the one with my own dog Nibbler, who passed away, came the same week that Tron Ares came out, which, again, Tron Legacy is a movie that I kind of look to and remember as kind of a point in time that was right before kind of my life changed so dramatically. And my life has changed dramatically now in the last, year and a half. So it's just, Tron and Tron Legacy, and Tron Ares just feel like three movies of a very specific time, of a very specific place, that, especially with Tron Legacy, I'd like to live in that world again, just to be, given the opportunity to do better, because, the world of Tron Legacy, at the end, it's all about doing better. It's all about being hopeful. And, there's a program in the real world, and what does that mean for humanity? And we can, against our better, vices, do better, because now we have, the perfect walking amongst us. Nope. Tron Ares is about the violent takeover of a corporation by another corporation. How 2025, huh? And how, not how, just how kind of sad, really, that's the real world is so reflective. The Bastards won, the Dillingers in the world won. And, I actually think it's a little disappointing that Tron Ares leaves us with such a good cliffhanger, because Evan Peters dressed up as David Warner's Sark from Tron is a great visual, even if it does seem a little out of place with the rest of the visuals of the movie. But I really like the visual of Evan Peters dressed up as Sark, and I don't think we're never going to get anything more of that, which is a shame, I feel, because I feel like that's an interesting direction to go. It's kind of amusing to me that the gentleman who directed Tron Ares, Joachim Rønning, was also the director of another movie who has a kind of hanging thread that would have been a lot more interesting than the movie we get. That movie being Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales, another Disney movie, which ends with Davy Jones coming back. And Will Turner and this whole kind of, it's very much the finale to the original three movies that you never knew you wanted but got. And then they have this kind of cliffhanger at the end of the movie that hints at something a lot more interesting happening, but we're not getting that because Pirates of the Caribbean is being rebooted. So, and we'll never get it now. And, Joachim Rønning directed that movie. Tron Ares will probably never get to see Evan Peters, making good as Sark, but I think it's very interesting to have him going into the digital world at the end of the movie and becoming, Sark, 2.0. So I'm disappointed at what Tron Ares is because of the Jared Leto of it all, but I actually like Jared Leto in it a fair bit more than I ever have in anything else. It's just because of Jared Leto, we're probably not getting any more Tron, and what a shame, because there are some interesting ideas in Tron Ares, but I think the interesting ideas of Tron Legacy were more interesting. So go with those. Follow those through lines. Make Tron Ascension. Don't kowtow to a big name celebrity just because they're a big name celebrity. And, that's Tron Ares, which, it's fine, but not when it fails and bombs as hard as this movie has, because this movie bombed pretty hard compared even to the perception of Tron Legacy, which didn't bomb. So, again, Tron Ares bombed. Tron Legacy did not bomb. Tron Legacy is a better movie than anyone remembers. So go rewatch Tron Legacy, because Tron Legacy, kind of like Prometheus, deserves a rewatch because it's asking more interesting questions and it's doing more interesting things. And, Tron Ares and Alien Covenant have a lot in common in terms of robots trying to and wanting to feel like real people. And, feeling like human beings and feeling like, well, what does it mean for a robot to have emotions or not have emotions? Because, in Alien Covenant, it's all about Walter and David has the emotions limited, and Walter, and then Walter had the emotions limited and David didn't. So, Tron Ares is about a program becoming a real boy. It's like all these ideas have been exploited before by other people in much more interesting ways. And that for me feels like the kind of the worst part of Tron is like, it just doesn't feel like Tron in a lot of ways. It feels like something else, and something else not as well written as those other things even are. Tron Legacy had some great cross-promotional stuff. It had a pinball machine. It had Adidas merchandise that glowed in the dark. It had the disc, the data disc. You could buy the Blu-ray of the movie, and it came with the data disc that the Blu-rays were in. It was like a whole thing. Like the original sequel was so over-branded in a way that was like, now we get all the Tron merchandising. Like it was a thing. Tron Legacy was a thing. Tron Ares is not, and I think that they were expecting it was going to be, and it's just a shame that it wasn't, because I think a lot of people that were involved with Tron Ares tried, Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross amongst them, Joachim Rønning as well. But, the Jared Leto of it all just gets in the way. And boy, what a shame, because for once I'm actually not complaining about Jared Leto's acting. I'm actually just complaining about Jared Leto, the person, which is a shame, because if you want to take that mantle on yourself, you have to be responsible for the successes and the failures. And this is a pretty big financial failure. And Jared Leto's, not going to be the lead in a big Hollywood blockbuster for a while, if ever again, no matter how good he looks at 53. So I'm hesitant for anything else Tron to come out, because I don't think it will. But if Jared Leto's involved, dear God, help us all. So, end of an era. Tron Legacy, Tron Ares, putting an end to the Tron era. So we can just rewatch Tron Legacy and listen to the soundtrack over and over again, and then the soundtrack for Tron Ares as well. pretty good. So it's very good. And especially with red headlights in the world being very common, if you put it on while driving, it makes you feel like you're in the world of Tron. For those of you who love to listen to music while driving, as opposed to those of you that are listening to this while driving instead. So go check it out because it's as good as anything as Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor have done together. And they've done a lot together, including, The Social Network, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I mean, they've worked with a lot of people. This is, this is a really good soundtrack. It's, kind of unfortunate that the soundtrack is better than the movie because I don't think the soundtrack for Legacy is any better than the movie is. I think they're both very, very good. And also, to mention one other thing, speak to the Star Wars of it all, the digitally de-aged and digital Jeff Bridges look very good now, more so than I would have remembered them looking ever. And they look better than a lot of the digitally de-aged, Grand Moff Tarkin, Princess Leia, all those kind of, the Mark Hamill. I mean, so many, Star Wars just did over and over and over again. So those are the ones I'm going to go back to in terms of points of reference. But digitally de-aged Clue / Jeff Bridges, pretty good. And also Jeff Bridges' voice doesn't sound like Harrison Ford in Indiana Jones as Clue. Like he actually sounds like a younger version of himself. He kind of, they either pitched it correctly or he was doing the like a pitched up version of his voice, but it doesn't sound like old man Jeff Bridges, which in Tron Ares, it's very much old man Jeff Bridges, kind of garbling his lines. So, and a little less of the dude and man of it all from Tron Legacy, which I always laugh. Jeff Bridges is doing the dude abides, dude and man. I know Kevin Flynn did it in Tron, but it's funny because, again, Tron comes out when Jeff Bridges is not a household name. Tron Legacy comes out when Jeff Bridges being involved in the project is enough of a needle mover in the mainstream pop culture to get eyes on it, and that's why he's in Tron Ares. Yeah, go see Tron Ares if you want to try to get some support under the wings of Tron, under the digital wings of Tron, but I think that this might be the end of an era for Tron, unfortunately. So, until the next solo episode of the Kulturecast, if you are a animal lover and a pet haver, keep me in your thoughts, because, every day is a little bit of a struggle here, because losing an animal is pretty rough. If you know, as they say. So, and please rate, and review the show, on iTunes, give it a 5-star review. And then on, Spotify, give it a 5-star review as well. And, leave a review on, iTunes. Help me out. If you listen to the show and you've never left a review on iTunes, go and do that. It helps out the show immensely. And it's the easiest way to interact with the show, non-financially. So, if you want to interact financially, patreon.com/culturecast. We post episodes of Rankin' on Bond once a month and some bonus stuff from time to time as well, trying to get better about that as well. So go there, do that, and come back for the next episode of the Kulturecast.